Welcome to First Parish, Milton. My name is Jeff Stote. I'm a member of the Worship Committee. First Parish is a vibrant, welcoming congregation that welcomes all people to grow deep faith and to take bold action. We're so glad you're here with us today. This sanctuary is made holy by your presence. Now, if you are joining us for the first time, please take a welcome packet from the pew rack. There's information about our services and our child care. If you fill out the yellow card inside the packet and drop it in the offering plate, you'll receive our weekly email newsletter, which can help you get to know us better. The greeters today, in the back there, Charlie Franick and Richard Venable, are both wearing colorful tags, and they'll be standing by the doors after worship is over. Please join us, and Richard or Charlie can walk you to social hour together and answer any questions you might have. We strive to make our worship experience accessible to people of all ages and abilities. Please see the welcome card in your pew for more information on this, or speak with an usher at the back of the church. The work of living our faith is done both in and out of worship, so I draw your attention to the printed announcements that came with your order of worship. These announcements are important news of our community life, so please read them carefully. Extending a generous welcome is a spiritual practice, and I invite us all to extend that welcome to our neighbors by taking a few minutes to greet them warmly.
As we gather in the midst of the franticness of a busy season, let us warm our sanctuary and our bodies in song as we quiet ourselves with Hush. Please rise in body or spirit and sing number 1040 in your teal hymnal, Hush.
Somebody's calling my name.
Zane and Ruby Baker-Poveromo light our chalice this morning. And let us say the call to worship printed in your order of service. Come, let us gather. We gather to celebrate the sacred within and among us. We come to seek spiritual growth and understanding. We strive to practice acceptance, forgiveness, and love. Together, we work to build a world with justice and compassion. Come, let us gather together. Each week during the season of Advent, we light candles in a wreath. Advent literally means arrival or coming, and here we celebrate the many spiritual truths that we hope, expect, and long for to arrive in the world, with the coming of the solstice and the celebration of one faith's Messiah being born into this world with full expectation of his return. So we decorate our meeting house, which some lovely church mice did this week. And many of us also decorate our homes with evergreens to remind us that life flourishes even through this time of dark, cold days, and that there is indeed something about life that is eternal. We put the evergreens into the circle of a wreath to remind us of the wholeness of life, the constancy of its cycles, and the comfort of knowing that we are connected. So we mark this time of hopeful expectation, of longing for evidence of the sacred in our world and for the return of light by lighting a candle each week for those eternal spiritual principles that speak to us this time of year, whatever our theology. So it's our practice to share testimonials and reflections. And this week I've asked Julie, Ruby, and Zane to share a reflection on small things that have made a big difference.
When Parisa asked our family to talk about a small thing that has made a big difference in our lives, I immediately thought about the small favors that friends, neighbors, and members of the First Parish community do for us almost every single day. As many of you know, I have low vision and do not drive. When I first gave up my car 6 years ago, I was incredibly worried about how I would manage family, work, and life. I needn't have worried. Help always arrives, and many times I don't even need to ask, something that is definitely a learned skill. I would be standing up here all day, and if I've met you, chances are you've helped me. So I would mention your name. So instead, I'll just give you a sense of this week alone, the small favors, and how it's made a difference in our lives. On Monday, our friend and neighbor Rebecca gave Zane a ride to school, to before school care, so I didn't need to rush there in the yucky weather. Ruby's friend Maya and her mom Megan took Ruby to swim team and then home. Ruby's new to swim team and didn't have a bathing suit, and I couldn't rush out and get her a bathing suit for swim team, so she borrowed one from our friend Ayla. Ayla showed up to the rescue again when she picked up Zane at after school on both Monday and Wednesday and stayed with him until the ride brought me home. On Tuesday and Thursday, I dropped Zane at his friend Robert's house very early in the morning, and his mom, Linda, took care of him and took him to before school care so I could get to work on time. On Friday, I was walking Zane to before school care before 7 a.m. while it was still dark outside because the ride wanted to pick me up at an absurdly early hour to take me to my requalification hearing. Debbie Alcibi saw us walking along and not only drove us to Glover for Zane to get to before school care, but waited while I signed him in, drove me back home, and then gave me time to have a cup of coffee and meditate before my stressful hearing. Then she came back and got Ruby and brought Ruby to school. On Friday night, I received my usual text message from my friend Carolyn, who sends me a message that says, "Spin, Thelma?" I answered as I usually do, "Yes, Louise," knowing that I would come outside early on Saturday morning and she would be there to take me to spin class at the Y. Yesterday, June and Randy Scott brought me to pick up our Christmas tree at church, as they do every year, and June even makes Randy bring it in the house and put it in the Christmas tree stand, which is not a small task. This morning, I got a ride to church with June. I'm reading from a large print hymnal that Emma Jean labeled with my name, which makes me feel very special. And I'm reading from a large print order of service that some little elves print out for me every week. I think it's Kiki or Miriam, and that makes a big difference. We are always, always, always taken care of, in large ways and in small ways. I try to teach Ruby and Zane to recognize these small favors for what they are, blessings.
Our opening words this morning come from the mouth of Nelson Mandela, quotes from whose life have been floating around our awareness all week since learning of his passing. But I can think of no one better to exemplify how someone can live both the very smallness of our human existence and its mightiness as well in the span of a single lifetime. Upon his release from 27 years in prison, Mandela addressed the crowd cheering for him with these words: "I greet you all in the name of peace, democracy, and freedom for all. I stand here before you not as a prophet, but as a humble servant of you, the people. Your tireless and heroic sacrifices have made it possible for me to be here today. I therefore place the remaining years of my life in your hands." Though this season might keep us distracted with shopping lists and parties and so many things to do, we pause this morning to consider all of those small turns that make for mighty change, the way the smallest within and among us speaks to the mightiest of truths.
This morning's reading is called Alive Together by Liesel Mueller. Speaking of marvels, I am alive together with you, when I might have been alive with anyone under the sun, when I might have been Abelard's woman, or the whore of a Renaissance pope, or a peasant wife with not enough food and not enough love, with my children dead of the plague. I might have slept in an alcove next to the man with the golden nose, who poked it into the business of stars, or sewn a starry flag for a general with wooden teeth. I might have been the exemplary Pocahontas, or a woman without a name, weeping in master's bed for my husband, exchanged for a mule, my daughter, lost in a drunken bet. I might have been stretched on a totem pole to appease a vindictive god, or left, a useless girl child, to die on a cliff. I like to think I might have been Mary Shelley in love with the wrong-headed angel, or Mary's friend. I might have been you. This poem is endless. The odds against us are endless. Our chances of being alive together statistically non-existent. Still, we have made it. Alive in a time when rationalists in square hats and hatless Jehovah's Witnesses agree it is almost over. Alive with our lively children who, but for endless ifs, might have missed out on being alive together with marvels and follies and longings and lies and wishes and error and humor and mercy and journeys and voices and faces and colors and summers and mornings and knowledge and tears and chance. So ends the reading.
Though it's not in our order of worship, that was Grace Allendorf singing beautifully. The odds against us are endless, writes Liesl Mueller. Our chances of being alive together statistically non-existent. Still, we have made it. On the tension of the tightrope between our smallness, our insignificance, and our power and responsibility lie so many of our spiritual questions. All along that tightrope, there are lessons to be learned. Lillian Daniel, one of my favorite commenters on religious life, tells a story of one of the lessons she learned, almost literally on a tightrope. On a trip requested by her 19-year-old son, she found herself staying in a remote treehouse in Nicaragua. She writes, in order to get from the treehouse to the dining room, you had to walk down a steep mountain path and then across a long wooden suspension bridge that creaked and swung with the wind, revealing the gaping crevasse underneath. I do not like heights, she writes, so I was eager to limit my encounters with this suspension bridge to the times when I was most hungry. But one night when I was alone in the treehouse after the sun had set, the lights all went out. I was terrified. But then I sat up and they came back on. The same thing happened again. They went out, and then when I sat up, they came back on. Suddenly, it occurred to me, these lights were on a motion detector. But given that this might keep happening all night, I decided to brave the bridge. Following the lights on the ground, I made my way to the bridge and stepped on the wooden slats, barely able to see where to place my feet. And then it happened. The power went out. There was no light anywhere. Well, fortunately, I knew exactly what to do to get those motion detectors' attention. Swinging in the middle of that bridge, reluctantly, I let go of the rope railing just long enough to wave my arms over my head. But nothing happened. I waved them more frantically this time. I was in total darkness. I waited for the lights to come back on and finally realized I was stuck. I could stay here terrified, swinging in the darkness, or I could put one foot in front of the other. Given that it was dinner time, I let my stomach do the walking and slowly shuffled my shaking legs to the other side of the bridge when, of course, the lights came back on. I later found out that there were no motion sensors on any of the lights. In the jungle, the power just goes out all the time, and sometimes it comes back on. Out there on that bridge, waving my hands like a magician, I thought I had the power to turn the lights on, when in fact, the source of the power was somewhere else entirely, and nothing to do with me. We're living that dance especially this time of year, aren't we? Convinced that we can fit in just one more little errand before the day is through. Sure that we can check everything off of this maniacal list that we've created for ourselves to make the perfect time for everyone else. I had a metaphorical suspension bridge moment nearly 11 years ago. My husband Enrique and I were living in Oakland, California, and I was working with the Faithful Fools Street Ministry, which many of you have heard me talk about before. One of the practices of the Faithful Fools is to make street retreats, spiritual retreats that take place instead of in a remote and beautiful rustic location, free from the worries of everyday life, or take place on the streets of the Tenderloin of San Francisco. The Faithful Fools began with one-day street retreats, beginning in the morning and gathering again for reflection the same afternoon, and then had begun to experiment with longer experiences that involved staying overnight on the streets. I had missed that they had started doing it during Holy Week, a time when Christians often practice fasting and other kinds of relinquishment as well. And I had missed the first opportunity to do it. So by the time the second year rolled around, I was committed to carrying it through. There was one glitch. I had an 11-week-old infant. I was nursing, so it was not only, not just emotionally, but also physically impossible to imagine being separated from Kian for 4 whole days. In my mind, the solution was clear. I would bring him with me. I sat in a reflection circle with the other participants preparing for the retreat and saw the looks of worry and disapproval on their faces. I sat with my husband Enrique's anxiety about being apart from us since he was in school full-time and couldn't join us. I sat with my own mistrust and raw sense of vulnerability about everything. That combination of hormones and complete life change that happens in the first few months after childbirth is no joke, friends. I was in the midst of the tightrope of the ever-deepening realization of how much depended on me, the whole life of this new being in the world, and the troubling fact that instead of that making me feel more powerful, I felt a whole new level of fear for us, for our society, for this planet. The preciousness and fragility of our very existence hit me with a force I had not known was possible. So as foggy-headed as I felt, my gut was entirely clear. My feeling of utter vulnerability was so consuming that there was no point in running from it. I might as well dive deeper into it and see what it had to teach me. So due to the concerns of other retreat participants, it was decided that Kian and I would do a modified retreat. We would sleep in the building of the Faithful Fools at night, but keep usual shelter hours there, in after supper, out before breakfast. Other than that, we were on the street. Others were sleeping on the streets or attempting to get beds in shelters nightly. Our group gathered for reflection once or twice a day in the plaza outside City Hall in San Francisco and spent the rest of our time wandering the city or sitting in a spot to see what of life came to us. In those 4 days, I spent a lot of time at the public library, had my meals in different soup kitchens, spent more time in parks and exploring the city than I ever had the chance to do before or since. And the lessons of those days could fill many sermons, but the one I want to share with you today is this. While I had been feeling either invisible or shunned in the upscale shops of Berkeley with our infant son, trying to find a stroller in our price range and what bottles might be best to use, on the streets of San Francisco's Tenderloin, there was a kindness and generosity shown to me without hesitation, completely unbidden. A woman with a trove full of plastic bags filled with who knows what made space for me next to her on a stoop, noticing how tired my face looked. Folks oohed and awed over Kian, tried to get him to smile, offered me whatever food they had, and lots of tips on where to get more of it. A man passing me on a street corner pressed a $5 bill into my hand, though I had not been begging. There was a network of care on the streets that I hadn't experienced in the upper middle class enclaves across the bay, and probably right in the same city itself. Surprisingly, the places I felt most vulnerable on the streets were actually the places that were set up to help. When someone well-meaning and a little better dressed than the rest of the clientele sidled up to me at a soup kitchen and started asking a few too many questions, I realized that the wrong answers could bring me right into a whole system that might question my ability to be with and parent my son. My instinct was to stay away. Now, my experience was somewhat contrived, definitely temporary. So only the barest taste of what mothers and children who live without homes or who are marginally housed go through every day. I returned to my life of parenting in a relatively comfortable life with a new awareness that if the preciousness of my own child's life was going to teach me anything, it had to connect me and him to the preciousness of each and every child's life. That as vulnerable as I felt, the feeling was useless unless it knit me together in solidarity and shared destiny in some way with those who felt the same or worse. The power of that lesson has stayed with me through so many more years of the vagaries and vulnerabilities of parenting and ministry. The power is that when we are feeling the smallest, the most fearful of our future, the most insignificant, the power that we do have is our ability to connect, to find each other, to share the journey, to point each other to the wells from which we can drink the sustenance of compassion, of care for one another's bodies, of community itself. Julie's reflection is a perfect illustration of the ways those small things can connect us in mighty ways, the ways we are always already woven together if we're willing to lift the veil of our independence and see it. In this season when the news of the world is bleak, and we're told that the power to change things sits in the hands of an increasingly smaller few, I just invite us to remember that the song that Mary sang after the dream in which the angel Gabriel came to her, the message that comes to this poor, unwed teen is that the birth of her child will have the power to level mountains, can bring down the lofty from their thrones, and make those who are most vulnerable whole and powerful again. That power source that is so much greater than we are may not begin or end with us, but it can flow through us in those moments when we feel the most raw. And when we can plug into it, when we can listen for its presence, each of us a node of a little bit more compassion, a little bit more wisdom, a tiny spot of joy, a flickering flame of hope, we start to see the power of the mighty truth that things are not all as they seem and do not have to stay the way they are. We listen together as we enter into prayer for the voice of those smallest within us and among us, for how we can make mighty change. Please join in singing the song Listen, which is new to us, whose melody you heard earlier, and the words are printed in your order of worship. power of all life, Spirit of life, Goddess of love, arrive with us this season. In moments of silence, we listen for the stirrings of the Spirit, the voice still and small inside all. Into the deep quiet of this hour, we breathe deeply together, drawing nurture from the gifts of our lives. The company of friends and family with whom to mark celebration and loss. The privilege of enjoyment of nature and music and art. The simple pleasure of meals shared, of time and talents offered in service of others. In the midst of the pressure to move ever faster, give us the courage to take some things slow, to remind ourselves of the inner light in us which needs to be held in the arms of creation, cradled in soothing comfort, pushed to uncomfortable truth. Help us to help each other make that space and time of heart and mind. Let us be for one another the holy voice that says, "Take it slow, child. This is not to be rushed. You are a precious part of this universe. You deserve the time to flourish and grow." As we hold open the space for each other, may we learn to do so for ourselves. Help us to not forget that culture is shaped by people, that we are not powerless to change, and in fact, change comes only from us claiming our power. Help us to slow down, to listen to the stillness, to make space in our hearts and minds for the compassion that is utterly inconvenient and totally essential to lives of meaning. In these wide open hearts, we hold those among us who struggle this morning. With Mike and Tasha, we hold a prayer for their grandson, DeLuca, who is hospitalized with pneumonia. With India, we lift a prayer for her friend Gloria, suffering from a broken hip. With Carrie McDonald and his family, we hold a prayer for his grandmother, Florence Pearson, who passed this week at the age of 98. And we lift up prayers in memory with Bibi of Charlie Seymour, and with Lori McIntosh of her son Ian, whose 27th birthday would have been today. For all of these and so many more, prayers for healing, for remembrance, for new life to come from loss. We hold our hearts open. We lift up our joys as well, the busyness and flurry of people and activity in and out of this church yesterday morning in preparation for Christmas, in service to one another, in feeding each other, and in fellowship. For all of the hands and hearts that make possible this sacred season in our church, for the gifts of our buildings and grounds volunteers selling Christmas trees, for Dottie Pitt and Amy Cavadlo, who decorated our meeting house, for everyone who will make a little extra effort to make this holiday season special, for our choir working hard to prepare our Christmas Eve service, for every heart and mind that dwells here this morning. God of peace, Spirit of life, Goddess of love, hold us through this season. Amen.
Here we are in this moment of time, suspended on a bridge, walking the tightrope. Let us, with our offering, feel our power and fulfill our responsibility. We who are alive together now.
join me in the unison dedication. May these gifts be transformed into strength for this faith community, into comfort, food, and shelter for those in need, and may we be transformed by generosity. Please join in singing hymn number 150 in your red hymnal, pulling that out for the season. Veni Emmanuel, also known as O Come, Emmanuel. Though we may be tempted to think that we might get through this season on our own power, let us remember we always place our lives in each other's hands. That the miracle, the precious gift of our existence does not begin or end with our birth, but is within and around us always. Let its lessons come. Let the power of our smallest yearnings give us strength to make the world new. Amen. Go in peace.